So Komodo opened a whole new possibility with its global shutter in cinematography, but it also enabled a lot of people to owning a RED camera for the very first time. The Komodo was also called the baby dragon, so in this video I will take a closer look if the original Komodo compares to one of RED's most famous sensors, the Dragon. Coming up. Hi guys, my name is Paul, I'm a German-based cinematographer and this channel is all about filmmaking, gear reviews, but also DaVinci Resolve tutorials. So if that's something that you're interested in, consider subscribing. Thank you. So I personally own the Komodo since it came out, and this one already has like 700 hours of runtime on it, so I shot basically everything on that camera. But I also shot a few projects on Helium, Monstro, Gemini, and so on and so forth, and also on Dragon. And Dragon always had like the very special image to me, and therefore I picked one up. And also DxO Markt ranked this sensor to one of their best that they ever tested. So I was curious to see how the Komodo actually compares to the RED Dragon. So obviously these cameras are very differently built. This one was designed as a crash cam, so I don't want to go too deep in how the bodies are designed and so on and so forth. So in this video I will mainly focus on the image quality itself. So let's start by low light, and as you know, RED cameras are known to not the best cameras in low light. These cameras are hungry for light, and they're also meant to be used in environments where you set lights and everything up like that. But all that said, I think both of these cameras are actually pretty comparable, so I feel very confident using them up to ISO 3200 and even ISO 4000 or sometimes 5000 with noise reduction, and that's not a bad result if you compare it to other cameras out there. But obviously comparing it to most of the hybrid cameras out there, they're always much better. But also we are talking about Super 35 sensors here. Then we also conducted a few test shots outside in very different scenarios to test out these cameras, and we didn't use any filter at all, so my filmmaker heart was bleeding because we had to crank up the shutter, but we used the exact same lens and swapped it each time, which was the DZ035mm, so that you get the exact representation of the camera and the camera sensor. So what we can directly see in this comparison is that the Dragon is a little bit wider than Komodo, since it also has a bigger sensor than the Komodo, and I think it also has a different aspect ratio to the 17:9 aspect ratio that the Komodo has. Also, when we're talking about colors, is that the Komodo appears very magenta, whereas the Dragon appears very green. But all in all, I think both cameras look great, but personally I prefer the image of the Dragon. I think the Komodo, which also contributes to that magenta image, is also that we have a little bit of IR pollution going on in here, so the Komodo is known for that. On the Dragon I didn't see any of that. But what is very obvious is that we can see the difference in exposure. So both cameras had the very same settings, and the Dragon sensor is known to be kind of a dark sensor. That's just the way that the sensor is designed and how they handle ISO and stuff like that. But if you compare it side by side, you see that there is a stop of exposure difference. So when we did these test shots, in some of these we saw like traffic lights going on the Komodo, whereas on the Dragon we were still like years apart from that, even by letting in more light. So I was very interested in how these cameras actually compare in dynamic range. And personally, I love the Komodo when it comes to that, because I think it still has the best highlight roll-off on all these cameras that I own. Here's a list from the ranking that I got on all of these cameras. And I was extremely shocked when I saw this result, honestly, because we can see that by 4 stops overexposure, which is the max for the Komodo, on 4.5 stops and beyond, the highlight or the skin is gone. Whereas on the Dragon we can get 4.5 stops, which is good, but then in underexposure the results were totally different than what I expected. So on Komodo we can clearly see that with each stop we are getting darker. Also the color shifts to more green and also more noise, obviously. So therefore I think 3 stops of underexposure is the max for Komodo. Now when it comes to Dragon, the colors don't change that much, so I think also in color rendition the Dragon also looks great at 4 stops underexposure, and even 4.5 stops of underexposure were still useful when applying a little bit of noise reduction in Resolve. So that was very shocking to me. Whereas when going to 5 stops, we still have some artifacts with green patterns in there, which we cannot fix easily. So therefore, I get 9 stops of exposure latitude on this Dragon, which is insane. And on the Komodo, it's like 7.5 stops, which is also great to today's standards. And I think what I'm saying now is that I prefer the Komodo even over the C70, which has a little bit more detail in shadow retention and stuff like that. But also the highlight roll-off on these RED cameras is just amazing. And having even more flexibility in the Dragon is just insane. And even comparing that by today's standards, this sensor is from 2012 actually. So we're having a sensor that is already 12 years old by now, but still having these high ratings and stuff, which is absolutely insane. So all in all, is the Komodo really a baby Dragon? I think yes. I think we are not sacrificing too much, because also RED says that it has 16 stops of dynamic range, whereas this one 16.5 stops. So I think in somewhat we are kind of true, and also the global shutters were also known to be bad in dynamic range, and RED was actually the first company which got a global shutter with really good dynamic range, which is the Komodo. So therefore still I love the Komodo for its flexibility and all that stuff, but also I'm looking forward to shoot more and more projects with my Dragon. So and in the next video, or in one of my next videos, I will talk about if it was a good decision in buying a DSM-C2 camera in 2024. How does it look like? Is it worth it? And if the image quality still holds up. Everything you want to know about the Dragon X, I will talk about in my next video or so. So make sure that you are subscribed, and I'm gonna see you in my very next one. Bye bye. Cheers.